What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about some Dynasty buys and sells. So 3 players I'd be looking to target in trades, or I guess target in your startup drafts, and then 2 players I'd be looking to sell or fade in your startup drafts. And let's just jump right into the players here. So the first player I'm looking to buy is going to be Justin Herbert. He's currently being valued as the quarterback 9 on Keep Trade Cut, and in terms of his startup value, he's in like the early to mid-second round. And I just think his current ADP seems very short-sighted. I know he doesn't have the best short-term outlook for 2024. He's not a guy who's being drafted as a top 12 quarterback in redraft, but he has proven that he is a truly elite quarterback. He's also flashed a very solid ceiling early on in his NFL career, and he's only 26 years old. So he's proven that he's very talented. He's proven he can give you nice fantasy production, and he's still very young. Checks a lot of the boxes there. And I understand the last 2 seasons haven't been great, but context really matters here, and he's kind of just gotten unlucky. In 2022, he was the quarterback 15 in points per game, but he played with fractured rib cartilage from week 2 on. So he was in a spot where, he could have just sat out, he could have rested, let it heal. He wouldn't have been putting up, I guess, less than expected fantasy production, and everyone would have been fine with it. But because he plays through that, the production doesn't look ideal. And then he follows it up in 2023, where he plays through a fractured finger, and then also, didn't have great weapons. He's dealt with wide receiver injuries over these past couple of seasons. He was the quarterback 10 in points per game in 2023, so still was a QB1 playing through injuries. Mike Williams, was pretty much done very early on in the season. And I feel like people have just forgotten that Justin Herbert averaged over 22 fantasy points per game as a rookie. He is the 3rd best rookie point per game mark, behind just Deshaun Watson and Cam Newton. So obviously really solid company there. And Deshaun Watson's season was, I think, like a 7-game sample size. Newton's the only guy who played a full season that was, better than him on a point per game basis. Everyone was all over CJ Stroud last year for his rookie year, and Justin Herbert averaged 3 fantasy points per game more than CJ Stroud in that 2023 rookie season. I think the Chargers are going in the right direction. They're not going to have great weapons this season, but they invested in the O-line in the draft. You have Alt coming in, who should just be, a cornerstone of this offensive line. They added McConkey in the 2nd round, so they still gave him a weapon to work with. I think Justin Herbert should be a round 1 startup pick. You just don't find that kind of talent, in Dynasty startups going in the 2nd round. So if you can draft Justin Herbert here, you take the maybe 1 year where he's not a quarterback 1, I think you run with it, moving forward, especially if you're like a rebuilding roster, a young team. I love Justin Herbert here as a buy. Then a player I'd be looking to sell is going to be Dalton Kincaid. He's currently valued as the tight end 3, a mid-round 3 starter pick. And it kind of sucks because I don't want to be out on Dalton Kincaid. Like, I want to be in on him. I really liked him as a prospect. I was high on him heading into last year for redraft and for Dynasty, but I feel like the hype has just gotten out of control. At his current price, he's almost being treated like he's already broken out, like we already know he's going to be an elite tight end moving forward. And I understand why people are so in on him. Like, the ceiling seems crazy high. Being Josh Allen's potential number 1 weapon could lead to insane fantasy production. But I just don't know if we're there yet, and I don't know if that's a guarantee. Like, I don't think we can just be penciling that in based on what we saw last year. He was the tight end 14 in points per game, which for a rookie tight end, totally fine. I didn't like that his ADOT was down at 6, but that's not a Kincaid issue. That was more like a usage issue. But there was also the situation where he wasn't targeted super heavy in the red zone. He was 8th in total targets, 16th in red zone targets. Like I said, he wasn't a tight end 1. So I think the season we saw last year, now projecting him to just be a high-end tight end 1 for the rest of his career, which is what you're paying for him right now, is like, a mid-round 3 pick, the tight end 3. I just don't think it makes sense, and I don't think his current price lines up with the other fantasy tight ends. You have Trey McBride, who's going just a few picks ahead of him. McBride's a guy who's the same age, averaged 15 points per game once he became the starter last year, so we know Trey McBride is that guy. Like, if Kincaid did what McBride did last year, we would all be super excited about him moving forward, his potential. The difference is Trey McBride actually already went out and did that kind of production. You have Brock Bowers going right after Dalton Kincaid. I cannot draft Kincaid over Brock Bowers. I know the situations are very different. Kincaid has Josh Allen. Bowers is like on a questionable Raiders offense. But just in terms of, them being prospects, they are super far apart, right? Kincaid, he was a 1st-round pick, but he really does not compare as a prospect to Brock Bowers. So I can't take him over Bowers. If you also want to go for like a younger tight end, you have Kyle Pitts going like a full round later, a dude who's already delivered in 1,000+ yard receiving season and is also still a year younger than Dalton Kincaid. I feel like this idea that like Kyle Pitts is like getting up there in age, he's super young. He just came into the NFL when he was super young. So he's still a year younger than Kincaid, even though he has 2 more years of NFL experience. So I probably prefer Pitts over Kincaid at this point, and you're getting him cheaper. And then I also just think if you want a proven tight end, like Mark Andrews is going even after Pitts. So I just think compared to the other tight ends, I prefer the other guys around him. I think he's being valued as if he's the sure thing. And, maybe he ends up being this stud tight end, but I definitely don't think it's a lock at this point. Now, shifting back to a player I'm going to be looking to buy, it's Drake May. He's currently valued as the quarterback 18 on Keep Trade Cut as a round 4 startup pick. And I do understand that at this point it might be kind of tough to buy rookies because if someone actually selected a player in a rookie draft, they're probably a little bit higher on them than consensus. But, maybe you just had a startup, you want to trade for him, or maybe someone took him, because he was just considered the best player available and they would be willing to make a move. I just think this, evaluation of QB 18, round 4 startup pick, it just makes no sense to me. I feel like heading into the draft, Drake May and Jaden Daniels were like pretty interchangeable. Maybe some people preferred May, some people preferred Jaden Daniels, but I think most people had them pretty close together in a pretty similar quarterback tier. But for some reason after the draft, like Jaden Daniels going to the Commanders is viewed as a significantly better landing spot than Drake May going to the Patriots. And it might be a better landing spot, but I don't think it's like anything extreme. And I think the Patriots have, at least proven through this free agency, through this draft, that they're trying to build around Drake May. They're trying to get him weapons. There's no guarantee it works out, but they're at least making the effort, to set him up for success here. And I just think you should not be able to get a quarterback who went 3rd overall, has a pretty high fantasy ceiling in like the round 4 of a startup. That just seems, like he's being misvalued at this point. Even if you're not a huge Drake May guy, I think you have to recognize the value there. So you currently have Jaden Daniels going at like the 2-3 turn. Personally, that's where I have Drake May. I think he should be right in that same range. So if you can buy low on Drake May, I think he could be a nice, cornerstone on your Dynasty roster moving forward. Then back to the final sell here. It's going to be Jared Goff, another quarterback, actually being valued right ahead of Drake May as the quarterback 17, a 4th round pick. And this price, just like Drake May's was crazy to me, this Jared Goff price is also crazy to me. Goff is in a good situation offensively. I get it. He just got extended. You have the weapons there, Laporta, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jahmyr Gibbs. I'm not denying that this is a great environment to play in for Jared Goff, but just looking at his fantasy production, his ceiling is just so capped. Like, I feel like his fantasy peak moving forward is like a back-end QB1. I do think he had like a quarterback 8 season in points per game with the Rams, but that was before we had like a million quarterbacks with rushing upside. It's just a different quarterback landscape at this point. Like 17 points per game probably isn't going to have you as like a mid-tier quarterback 1 like it might have, 6-7 years ago. And I just think a 4th round pick is a pretty expensive price to pay for a veteran quarterback with fairly limited upside. There are plenty of quarterbacks going after him that I prefer over Goff. Would easily take the rookies, Drake May, JJ McCarthy. On Keep Trade Cut, they're currently being valued behind Jared Goff. I think you could also make arguments for other young quarterbacks, Bryce Young, Will Levis, Bo Nix. Like, these are guys who could end up giving you that Jared Goff production, but they're much younger. You're obviously taking on some risk because there's no guarantee that they pan out. But I think there's arguments for those guys. And I don't think, like, they should be going multiple rounds after Jared Goff, which is what we're seeing. I think even Deshaun Watson has a case to be going ahead of Jared Goff. I know he's been pretty rough over the past 2 seasons, but in his healthy games last year, he actually outproduced Jared Goff. And, you have to think he still has somewhat of that upside within him based on the production he had with the Browns. So for me, can't do a 4th round pick for Jared Goff. I just really cannot get around to it. And then the final player I'm going to be talking about here, my final buy, it is going to be Tank Dell, currently being drafted as the wide receiver 21, a 5th round startup pick. And I'm someone who is very high on Tank Dell, both in redraft and in Dynasty, but I think I'm even a little bit more shocked at this Dynasty value than his redraft value. Like, I think he's underrated in both, but this specifically Dynasty, it's kind of wild to me. In these 7 games where Tank Dell and Nico Collins were healthy, playing together and starting, Tank Dell averaged 18.8 PPR points per game. He was an absolute monster. Nico Collins was right below him at 18.2. This is not like a Tank Dell over Nico Collins argument. Not saying I couldn't make that argument, but I think, they both were producing very well when they were playing together, both healthy on the field. And even though Tank Dell's like an older rookie, that is still insane production for a rookie wide receiver. You also have the quarterback connection with CJ Stroud. They're going to be paired together for at least the next 3 seasons. You have to imagine CJ Stroud's going to be with the Texans pretty much forever. And then you'd think they would want to extend Tank Dell, just based on how well he played last year as a rookie. So in redraft, I could see the concern. You have Stephon Diggs coming in. It's a crowded wide receiver room. Maybe you think Tank Dell is going to get bumped out of 2 wide receiver sets. There's going to be too many mouths to feed. So, I could kind of understand the argument for not having him ranked super high in redraft. But, this Diggs trade is pretty much a rental. It's like a 1-year deal. He'll be a free agent after the season. There's no guarantee he's there long term. I just think it's super rare where you can draft a young wide receiver at this price after they've already broken out. Typically, if you have a 24-year-old wide receiver and you're getting them as, wide receiver 21, their best season's probably a fringe, wide receiver 2 year, where you're hoping maybe they take a year 2, year 3 kind of leap moving forward. Tank Dell, when he was healthy, was dominant, 18 plus points per game. And you're able to draft that as a back end wide receiver 2 when that dude is still young, healthy, all of it. To me, he's a smash pick, probably one of my favorite values in both Dynasty and redraft. You look at a dude like Puka Nacua, he averaged 17.6 points per game as a rookie and is now valued as the wide receiver 6. Obviously, it's not the same sample size, right? Tank Dell was 7 games averaging 18 plus points per game. But even if it was 15, 16, I still think he should probably be going higher than this wide receiver 21 spot. So Tank Dell, someone I'm definitely looking to target. So the 3 buys were Justin Herbert, Drake May, and Tank Dell. The 2 sells were Dalton Kincaid and Jared Goff. Let me know your thoughts. If you want to run any trades by me, would love to hear them. We'll get back to you as soon as I can. But thank you all for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.